Hello, Kelly Bear here. Today I am with you for a philosophical waffle, as that's what I'm calling them. Inspired by a comment someone had made either on one of my Instagram posts about a previous video like this, or maybe it was on one of the previous videos themselves. I can't remember, but yeah, it inspired me to call them philosophical waffles. So you'll see from the title that I'm going to be speaking about my word for 2023. And yeah, we're almost, well, it's the 29th of January as I'm recording this. So I'm well into the first month of the year is pretty much over at this point. And yeah, I'm only mentioning or really starting to talk about my word of the year now because it's taken me this long to really settle into what it means for me to have that word of the year. My word of the year is resilience, and I chose it. I think I had already decided by sort of the end of October, beginning of November. It was the one that was floating around in my head, and I think by the beginning of December I was certain that that was the year, the word that I wanted to go with this year. But because I needed some resilience, big time. I do need resilience. But other than the word and what you sort of envision when you think of resilience, I hadn't really gone beyond what that entails when it comes to embodying that or utilizing it. I had two words for last year, which were gentleness and consistency, and I didn't really do a very good job of sort of keeping them in mind or sort of working on sort of I just didn't do a very good job with those two words last year. But I feel like they somehow sort of sunk in and they tie into this year's word a little bit. Last year, at the beginning of last year, I was in a very, very bad space in many different spheres of my life, and I just needed softness. I really felt like I needed to handle myself or be handled with kid gloves. It was not a good time. And so those words gentleness felt appropriate, and consistency, to be consistently gentle, but also just to consistently just keep going. I just needed to keep going. I just needed to get through each day, each week, each month. And boy, was 2022 a pig of a year for me, and I know it was for a lot of people. So while I didn't find myself in the same sort of very fragile headspace as I at the beginning of this year as I did last year, I did still feel like I was on rocky ground, or like I am on rocky ground, metaphorically speaking. If you see me looking down, it's because I've actually written out a bunch of notes to sort of clarify what I wanted to say, or sort of remind myself of the points that I wanted to make. So this is, I guess, I'm right now touching on why resilience is my word for 2023, and yeah, it's because I just need some, and because I knew the way that last year went. There was a number of things that I was hoping would be resolved or being dealt with or wrapped up by the end of 2022, which weren't, due to, and most of it was health stuff, and it all got delayed or messed up due to, well, the NHS falling apart, but also because I had other health stuff come up, which then meant I couldn't get treatment or help with the other health stuff because this other stuff needed to be dealt with, but also because people dropped the ball, or things went missing, or I had to keep chasing things, or there's lots of delays and problems and underfunding. It also meant things that I was also already waiting on keep getting pushed back or delayed or postponed. So a lot of the stuff that I was stressed out about at last year has rolled into 2023, and I just thought, right, well, it's going to be a case of same shit, different year. I need resilience to deal with this because I can't fall apart every time stuff goes wrong. I just can't. So that's why resilience. I'm just going to keep sipping my coffee, my decaffeinated amaretto coffee, which is really good. So I've put here in my notes, what does it mean to be resilient? Because that's going to mean different things to different people. And resilience can take many forms, right? It can take the form of physical resilience, whether that is physical strength, as in like, someone who lifts heavy, for example, or physical resilience in the sense of having a really strong and healthy and robust immune system, something I have not been blessed with, unfortunately, which is not fun. Gonna be honest. You can be mentally resilient, or spiritually resilient, emotionally resilient. I mean, ideally you would be resilient in all these things, right? You could be physically resilient and robust but not be mentally, for example, or you could be really mentally resilient but not be physically. So yeah, it's like trying to work out what that means for me when I'm speaking about when I need resilience, is I'm speaking on a more sort of mental and emotional sphere, realm. I would love physical resilience so much, but living in a chronically ill body, I am already trying to do as much as I can to maintain and improve that as best I can. But it is what it is. So yeah, for me, I'm looking at sort of mentally and emotionally. So how do you cultivate more resilience? How do you become more resilient? This is the thing that I was stumbling over, right? Like, how do I get more? I want more, right? How does one go about becoming resilient? I don't know, but I've had a little ponder. So as I've mentioned which area is most important to me. How do I go about becoming more emotionally and physically resilient? I think for me, the first thing and most important thing I can do is to rest when I need to. I am not very good at listening to my body. I'm very bad at pushing myself beyond my limits, even after all these years, because I get frustrated that I can't do stuff a lot of the time due to pain or energy issues. And then when I do have low pain or high energy, if I have a low pain and high energy day or week, I want to do all the things because suddenly I'm like, wow, I feel amazing. And I guess for me, I feel amazing. It just means my baseline of pain is lower that day or that week. Or it's lower than my usual baseline. Like, it's not normal to live with pain all day, every day. And it's sort of mind blowing when I think about that people go through their lives not in pain and not utterly dragging their ass exhausted all the time. So when I'm like, oh wow, I feel amazing, I want to utilize that. Unfortunately and ironically, doing that then can push me into another crash, another flare up, and cause more pain. It's a vicious cycle essentially. So for me, one of the things that I can do is rest. I've also spoken about in previous videos about how rest is resilience, rest is resistance. So yeah, I'm now going to be saying rest is resistance and rest is resilience, because it takes resilience to say, no, I need to stop, I'm going to rest. And so rest also can help build resilience. So that's something that I feel is that I can do. And it put me in mind. I was listening to an episode a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago, an episode of the Middle-Aged Witch podcast by Eli Rowe. I'll try to remember to link it down below. It's a really good podcast. I really enjoy it. And Eli, I think, was talking about ritual. I think it's the ritual episode, or maybe it was the moon episode. But she was talking about, or maybe it was the Sabbath episode. It was, I think it was one of the more recent ones. But either way, she's speaking on how, as witches, sometimes we can really beat ourselves up if it comes to a Sabbat or an Esbat or some other magical work that we're meant to be doing, and we're unable to do it because we don't have the physical, mental, or emotional capacity to do so, because we are burnt out or really, really run down, or just, just really exhausted. Because that, burnout, like medical burnout, is very different to sort of the colloquial burnout. And she said something along the lines of, sometimes rest is the ritual. So if you had originally planned to do a full moon ritual to honor the full moon, to enjoy the full moon, to maybe do some magical working, and you are absolutely unable to do that physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever capacity, sometimes that is because you need rest, and the ritual is resting. Sometimes rest is the ritual. I really like that. So I think I'll be saying that to myself whenever that situation pops up for me, if I'm unable to enjoy my full moon rituals. So yeah, my words of 2022, as I have previously said, were gentleness and consistency. I feel do come into play with building resilience or gaining resilience. And as I said, they were chosen off the back of really needing some softness. And resilience doesn't always require softness, as in, like, if you are feeling fragile and you need to build resilience, sometimes the gentleness and the softness helps sort of get you to a point. It helps to buoy you up, it helps to sort of cushion you, build you up to a certain point where you are then able to get the rest and the heads, and get yourself into the headspace that you need to feel a bit more resilient. But sometimes also resilience requires sometimes it requires a little tough love, whether that is from someone else giving that to you or you giving that to yourself. Sometimes it requires, putting your big girl pants on and getting out there and doing the thing regardless, right? And girding your loins with those big girl pants. So yeah, I feel like gentleness and consistency sort of can come into play in what I'm trying to cultivate here. And then I started to think about what resilience means to me, as well as how you can go about it. So resilience is getting the help or support that you need if you possibly can, because obviously given people's financial status or their location or various other factors, people are not always able to get the help and assistance they need. So for example, I could probably do with a buttload of therapy, but it's not something that is within my means at the moment. So I have to sort of raw dog that side of my life as best as I can, but hopefully one day I will be able to get some therapy for the things that I need help with. And by the same token, though, I have to advocate for myself a lot when it comes to my medical care. People that know stuff about me behind the scenes, people that I sort of am close with behind the scenes, will be familiar with me constantly, having to chase things up, make lots of phone calls, having to push for referrals or trying to get second opinions for things. It's a lot. It's exhausting, and that was part of the reason why I needed some resilience at the beginning of 2021. It wasn't all of it. It was a part of it, and partly why I felt that I needed the word resilience this year. So I partly why I felt like I needed the gentleness to sort of I'm getting my words mixed up. But yeah, so I felt that you know, getting the help that you need will help you build resilience, but also it takes strength and resilience to be able to ask for help, because some people feel that resilience always means going it alone. Grr, I am tough, I am strong, I am resilient, I am empowered, and I can do this on my own. And yes, sometimes you do need to do things on your own. Like I said, the big girl pants thing, right? Sometimes you just need to suck it up and do the thing, right? But also it takes strength to ask for help. It takes strength to get help. It takes strength to do the thing that's going to heal you, that's going to build you up, right? Um, um, so it doesn't have to be an individual thing, a me thing, an I thing, right? And also, I feel like resilience can be a community thing, in several different ways. As in, it takes a village, right? So that asking for help, it takes a village is the whole thing about raising children, and the reason that a lot of people struggle today, especially women who do the lion's share of child raising and child caring, is that they're expected to do everything on their own. There aren't the family connections, community connections a lot of the time, depending on where you live and the culture that you live in, obviously. I'm talking from like my perspective as someone who's in the UK and who lives in a city like London. Whereas before, people would have those connections of support. You wouldn't be doing it on your own. You would be getting the help you need. There's that resilience in getting the help that you need. But also, that then ties into strength in numbers, right? So you are looking at community care and mutual aid, the people who are able taking care of people who are not able in whatever capacity that means, and strength in numbers. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, because we've had a number of strikes in the UK. There's a lot of civil unrest for a number of reasons, you know, part of it being the cost of living crisis, a big part of it being the cost of living crisis. And so we've got unions, people joining unions, we've got different sectors striking, taking strike action. That's strength in numbers, right? That's the workers looking after each other, the workers looking after themselves and each other, and supporting one another through strikes. And then, you know, myself as a civilian support those strikes. That strike action is important, and people talk about how inconvenient strike action is, but the inconvenience is the point of strike action. You know, I may be having to potentially delay my shop update that was going to go ahead on Sunday the 5th of February, depending on what happens. This isn't to do with strike action, but the strike action has played into it. There was a cyber attack on Royal Mail, so they had to halt their international shipping service, but because there's also a bit of a backlog due to a lot of strikes, it sort of compounded the issue. But regardless of that, inconvenience me, and in some people it's going to more than inconvenience, I understand that, but I still support those strikes, because ultimately we have a lot of benefits. The rest of the working society who are not, you know, public sector workers are have garnered a lot of positives and a lot of good things through union action, like weekends or bank holidays and days like Christmas off, maternity leave, paternity leave, paid holiday, all those sorts of things, health and safety, all sorts of things. So it's important to me, especially as someone who comes from a working poor / sort of working class background. To me, I'm like, we need to support the workers. So yeah, strength in numbers. I'm going on a little bit of a political because it me. So I'm going to try and drive it back round to resilience again. I've put here, resilience for me is setting boundaries. Resilience is saying no to things. Sometimes it's putting in place boundaries of what you will and won't do, and those boundaries, I guess, can be it can be a physical boundary. It can be a metaphorical one, in the sense that of things that maybe people are overstepping the mark with you, and you're saying no. It could be that family members, I'm talking generally, not just talking about myself, resilience can be setting boundaries. It could be that family members always treat you a certain way, or and you're setting a boundary saying, no, this is not you, I'm not allowing you to do this, you're not allowing you to treat me like this anymore, for example. I think that's important. Resilience can be setting boundaries with how far you're going to push yourself. So again, for me, the whole idea of rest, I'm going to keep coming back to that idea of rest and a slow pace, is that that's a boundary for me. If my body is hitting a certain boundary, or my boundary, I need to sort of put the brakes on, right, and rest or slow down. I just wanted to see if I had written, there's this thing that I had thought I had written down, and I'm not sure where it is, but it's something that I've mentioned in my, I can't see it, maybe I didn't write it down, but I've spoken about in previous videos how I think for this year I'm going to try to do more by doing less. And I know that that sounds counterintuitive, but because I tend to get stuck in this boom and bust cycle physically and mentally, if I just slow my rolls, if I'm doing less, again, there's that gentleness and consistency coming into play, then I will ultimately be able to do more. And I've mentioned in videos last year how there's this, if you're inconsistently consistent, eventually you'll start to make headway. So, you know, even if I'm inconsistently consistent with my rest and doing less, I will eventually do more by the end of this year. That's the plan. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but for me, I feel like that's the way I'm going to have to go, and I'm going to see if that works, if that rings true, if that works out in the end. I shall try and report back on that. So I also put here, I think resilience means finding joy, right? So it's very hard. Things have been bleak for a long time and seem to be getting bleaker around the world on a number of different fronts. And it's very easy to get stuck in like the doom scrolling and the sort of, feel like there's this sort of grey cloud following everything and that everything is awful. Everything can be awful, but unless we take time to enjoy the smaller things in life, to have gratitude for what we have in life, for finding joy in whatever capacity that is, I think it's very hard to build resilience, because you need to be able to build your heart and your soul back up with some love and joy and positivity. And that's not to say that you're spiritually bypassing or that you're ignoring what is going on in the world all the time. I think having breaks from social media, and I think having breaks from watching the news can be really good for you, and it is something that I have had to implement on a regular basis. But by no means do I ignore what's going on all of the time, and I don't bypass stuff. Just sometimes I do need to step back, because otherwise I'm gonna have an absolute meltdown, which is how I felt a lot of towards the end of 2021, and it felt like a lot of 2022 for me. I felt like I was just constantly on the brink of, I don't know, a powder keg about to go off. I just felt so raw a lot of the time. So finding that joy, I feel, helps to build resilience, and is resilience taking the time to go, no, do you know what, I'm going to take this time to enjoy something, because you can't fix everything. Again, that quote that I said in a previous video, you can do anything but you can't do everything. Again, there's probably a caveat with, within reason, asterisks, within reason. But sometimes you just need to enjoy the walk in the park with the dog and just be in the moment, because that is going to ultimately help you to sort of become a little sort of stronger, build that little bricks of strength, that little wall of strength. I've also put here that resilience means deciding what it is you want to do and how you want to live your life. So for a long time, I trained in fashion design and development. I worked in fashion for over a decade. you know, it was a very cutthroat industry and very, very stressful, and is partially how I ended up so chronically ill when I turned 30. I got very, very sick. I was bed bound for a good while, and it was very, very frightening because it took a while to work out what was going on. Um, and I had to take myself out of that situation because it was not sustainable. I then became self-employed and I retrained and worked as a hairstylist and makeup artist again for almost a decade. Um, and I was worked with and was surrounded by lots of really amazing other self-employed women who are photographers or burlesque performers or costumiers, or I worked a lot in the cabaret and burlesque and sort of boudoir and fetish industry. That was my sort of, and like sort of in specializing in sort of vintage and alt styling. That was like, I did other stuff. I did lots of like bridal stuff and like more mainstream stuff, but my niche was like vintage and occult, vintage and alt occult, magic on the brain. Um, and there's a lot of this like hustle culture, girl boss, entrepreneurial, keep grinding, you know, whether it's your main hustle or your side hustle, like, and I just could never get myself into that. I've really struggled with it. Partly, I think, again, probably because I'm neurodivergent and my brain just does not work that way, but also because I'm chronically ill. I have medical fatigue and medical and pain issues. And I just can't push myself like that anymore. I learned the hard way that that was a bad thing to do. And actually, I was lucky that I made it as long as I did, because it turns out I probably was dealing with some of the issues of my illness through my late teens and my 20s, but my youth managed to help me push through quite a lot of that until I reached sort of the critical point when I turned 30. So I had to, the panini sort of put paid, it put a stop to my hair and makeup career, because being immunocompromised and being all up in people's faces for long periods of time just is not really workable for me. I was also hoping to switch careers by the time that I turned 40 anyway. I turned 40 in 2021, so a year into the panini almost. And but the decision was kind of made for me, so it felt less empowering. So it was something that I was planning to do and was sort of gearing towards, but it was a bit of a shock. It sort of, the rug being pulled out from under me like that, and sort of being forced to pivot so quickly, which I know happened to a lot of people. I'm well aware. I'm not alone in that. You know, it is what it is. We just have to sort of deal the hand that we're play the hand we're dealt, deal with the hand we're dealt. And so it made me realize that I had been really still pushing myself far too much. You know, doing hair and makeup is very physically demanding. I would be on my feet for hours and hours on end. I would be, you know, constantly, you know, using styling tools, and it's very physical. And then I'm carrying a really heavy kit all over London, all over public transport, hauling it up and down stairs, hauling it onto buses and trains and all sorts. And I realised, excuse me, that I had been really, really damaging myself, because I would do a day or two of jobs, and then I would just need to spend, you know, time in bed, you know, sometimes 2, 3, sometimes 4 days in bed, and I'd be trying to rest as much until my next job, which is why I have only been working part-time as a stylist, because I physically couldn't manage it. And even then I still wasn't helping myself. So I knew that I needed to take some time to really evaluate what I want out of life. And whenever people have asked me what would I do if money was no option, I've always said I would make sure all my family and friends are okay, and I'd like to do a lot of sort of community work. But if I'm looking at my own like personal goals for myself, I would like to basically, well, if the panini wasn't a thing, I'd like to do a lot of traveling, because I enjoy traveling, and what amount I have done I've really enjoyed and found character building and pretty edifying and fun. So I'd like to do that, but on an even more personal note, I would literally just like to make stuff. I would learn all sorts of techniques. I would learn how to do pottery, and I'd learn like how to do silversmithing to make jewelry, and I would learn, I don't know, working with stained glass. I don't know. I would just learn loads of different creative skills and just play and make stuff. So basically, I think I've seen t-shirts before online where all I want to do is stay home with my dog, drink tea and make things, or something to that effect. I'm like, yep, that's me. Now, ideally I would have an art studio to do that in, because I do mine in my bedroom, which is not the most ideal situation, but again, we play the hand we're dealt, and this is the hand I currently have. So I am, and I'm very fortunate that I was able to set up a quite a good space for myself. It does need a bit of work still, and I'm hoping to sort of continue to improve that as I continue with the business, reinvesting back into new and exciting things for the shop, but also sort of getting the space um, in a more sort of streamlined and workable and practical for me, and I'm very excited about that. I've got lots of ideas and plans. So yeah, deciding that I didn't want to hustle. I don't want to be a boss bitch. I want to run my business, which to me is just selling art. I don't want to be a businesswoman. I want to be an artist who is able to sell art. And I'm aware that this is a problem that a lot of artists have, where we just want to make stuff, but we're not very good at the other side of things. So I need to be kind of good at the other stuff, and I do need to learn and do better on that front. But ultimately, I'm taking myself out of that hustle culture as much as I can, because I do still need to promote myself. I do still need to, do the Instagram thing and all those other bits and bobs, and try and get my art out there, because that's the whole point, is for people to be able to see it and enjoy it and purchase it. But I'm trying to be better at managing that. I need to look back into using things that will help me schedule posts, and just to be a bit more, yeah, just really. And I think the more that I sort of work with this, building this business, and carving this little niche out for myself, I think I will just start to build a schedule and a build or a routine and skills, and it's just going. I learn by doing. I'm just gonna have to take my time. But basically, for me, how I want to live my life is a much slower pace. I've already been spending less time on social media this year. I haven't spent much time on Twitter, even less time on Facebook. I hardly on Facebook. I spend more time on YouTube, because I feel that's more sort of niche community based for me, and I really enjoy that. Anyway, that felt like a bit of a little side quest, but I'm gonna again try to bring it back round. So for me, I've put resilience also means being able to face the truth and act accordingly. Um, so for me, like, I've had people say to me when I go out into public spaces, like on public transport, and I'm wearing a mask, and I've had people be quite aggressive, or like, why are you wearing that? Or, for me, I am facing the situation, which is I am immunocompromised. I have some other issues that are being looked into, and I cannot afford to catch that nasty penini bug, or any other kind of virus or infection that's going around at the moment. So I have to do what I can to protect myself, and by doing so, I'm also protecting others. Because I am facing the situation that I have, which is I have health issues, which means I have to do that. And no one else is doing that. So it's been left, unfortunately, to the individual to try and protect themselves. And it doesn't always work like that, because really, health and public health should be a community thing, not an individual thing. But that's going to be a whole other rant if I go on that. So yeah, resilience means facing the truth and acting accordingly. So that was the example that I gave, but it could be for any other kind of situation, whether it's a family situation or a money situation you might be in. You might be in debt, or have a sudden expenditure pop up that you weren't expecting. Facing that, not putting your head in the sand. There are times, again, like I said, where I feel stepping away from things can be helpful to help you sort of build yourself back up. But if there's some sort of like immediate situation that needs dealing with, you know, resilience is being able to face that and act accordingly. And then the last couple of points, the issue of magical resilience. So utilizing magic and spell work to help build resilience, or to create resilience around you. So the first thing that would come to mind would be protection magic, protection and warding, whether that is of your home or yourself or your property, your like belongings, I don't know. Ideally a bit of all of those, right? And then also magic to sort of empower yourself to feel more resilient. So that might be doing a spell to sort of walk in the energy of a particular type of animal that makes you feel strong. Or that you want to embody for a particular situation. Maybe you're going into a meeting and you want to embody a certain type of energy, and you can do spell work around that, or carry a talisman around that reminds you of that. You can carry protective talismans. You can do you know, your sort of protective spheres. You can use glamour magic. I spoke about glamour magic in my last philosophical waffle, where you can dress in a way that you want to project and how you want to feel in order to feel more resilient or be more resilient. Like, I feel stronger and more resilient and more of a badass when I am dressed head to toe in black and I have got my bother boots on. If I've got my big stompy boots on, I feel like a badass bitch. And I feel, yeah, I feel like myself. That's my ultimate, like, how my ultimate meanness. And yeah, I if I dress that way, I will, like, I'm going to speak about something in a short moment, where I used dressing and glamour magic to help me feel more resilient, because sometimes faking it till you make it, right? Again, I spoke about this in my last video. Sometimes sort of faking yourself into resilience makes you feel more resilient and a bit tougher. And also, you could use affirmations and tools to help. So you can use affirmations every day to sort of build up, sort of you're changing those neurological pathways about the way that you think about yourself. Whether that's looking in the mirror and saying them to yourself, whether it's sitting down at your altar and doing something around affirmations, or a little ritual about, you could do a little daily resilience ritual. These are things that I'm thinking about for myself to sort of also incorporate this year. And then there's tools that you can use to help in stressful situations that are like a little resilience pack. But like, so for an example I can give, 2 days ago I had a phone call. Well, I had to go to the hospital for a last minute appointment that they'd literally made less than 24 hours before. My husband would usually come with me because I have a hospital phobia and a lot of medical based trauma, and he was away for a family thing, and I had to go on my own because I couldn't turn down this appointment, because then it was meant to have been an urgent referral that took 2 months. They wouldn't be able to see me for at least another month, and I was like, well, I'm gonna have to take this. So I had to put on those big girl pants, and I dressed all in black. I put my most awesome, like, black sort of drapey dress that I love, and my boots, my big bother boots, and I put on jewelry that felt protective. I used my spell bag that I wear for protection, all those kinds of things. I did my little ritual in the morning for sort of feeling and putting up my shields and everything. I did a little bit of makeup so that I felt like, you know, like with eyeliner and everything, so I felt like a bit of a badass. And yeah, I did that. And once I got to the hospital, I managed to go to the appointment. It was a lot. I was very tired when I got back, sort of emotionally drained from the experience and all the cortisone running through my system. But when I was in the waiting room and I had about 5 minutes before my appointment time, and I could really feel myself getting quite anxious. There were a couple of people in the waiting room who were talking about me quite audibly and laughing at me because I had a mask on in a hospital. To be fair though, the hospital that I went to this time has a mask mandate and they're much better at enacting it. So most people and all staff did have masks on, but there were these two people in there that were just sort of, it was because I had a half mask respirator. I didn't have a surgical mask or an N95. I had like a full like industrial half mask respirator, just as well, because the waiting room was in the lower basement without a single window and I couldn't see any AC or filtration going on, and the waiting room was packed, and I was waiting for at least half an hour because I got there early. I had to get there early to check in and fill out forms and all this other stuff. So I was getting quite anxious because I could hear these people laughing, and it was actually really warm in this basement, and I could tell like it felt really muggy, and I was just like, oh my god, like, oh, the germs, and I'm in a hospital and I'm on my own, and it was just too much, and I could feel the anxiety and the panic rising. So I did my box breathing while and then I did these affirmations that I do whenever I'm in situations of stress, and I did that for the like remaining 5 minutes, and I was starting to feel very sort of calm and floaty, and then the next thing I know, exactly on my appointment time, I got called through to my appointment. So that was good. I didn't have to wait. If I end up having to wait past my appointment time, my anxiety usually starts to get quite out of control. So thankfully I was called in on time. But I used, you know, dressing a certain way, wearing certain pieces of jewelry, wearing my protective spell bag, you know, affirmations, breath work, a little bit of visualization to it's I guess it's not so much as I was being resilient, it was helping to, I guess, I don't know, is that resilience? I don't know, but that was just the example that I wanted to give. And the other thing that I came to was that resilience takes time and it takes practice, much like, you know, magic or certain art skills or all sorts of things, right? It takes time and it takes practice. So it's something that needs to be topped up and worked at to keep going, right? To keep that resilience up. And then it made me think, what would be the tarot card that embodies that? And I think most people's first thought would be strength. The strength card, which in older decks was sometimes called fortitude. It's kind of same thing. To me, fortitude feels a little different to strength. I don't know, slightly different words. It's like the difference between judgment and discernment, right? But my card for the year this year is temperance. And actually, this really perfectly embodies, this is the card that this is from the Next World Tarot. This card actually for me really speaks to that idea of finding the balance, resting when needing to, but being firm with myself when I need to, putting those big girl pants on when I need to. So actually, yeah, I'm actually, this feels like the perfect card for the year of resilience, temperance and the year of resilience. So yeah, I just thought I'd bring a little bit of tarot into it. So that's that. I think this is my longest philosophical waffle thus far. I did go on a little bit of an amble on a couple of things, but I wanted to give examples, real world examples of what I've been dealing with, or what I've been going through, and how it's been for moi. So what does resilience mean to you? How do you cultivate resilience? How do you become more resilient? Is my definition of resilience what yours is. Am I, maybe what I'm calling resilience is something else maybe to you, or just actually is just something else. And do you have a word of the year? And if so, what is it and why did you choose it? Just out of interest, because I'm always interested to know what people's words of the year are. When I hear other people say, oh yeah, that's a good one, that sounds good, I'll like make a note, like, oh, maybe I'll have a year of this or a year of that, you know. So yes, that is my video about resilience, and hopefully I'll be able to check in at the end of this year and tell you whether any of this was useful, whether it still makes sense, whether I've come to any new conclusions or new tools or ways of doing things, and whether I managed to be more resilient, build more resilience, feel more resilient. Resilience. So, yeah, let me know in the comments your thoughts, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch and listen. I really appreciate you. I'm really enjoying these sort of more philosophical talks, these little chats. And I've had a couple of people say that they get a big cup of tea and they sit down and it feels like having a little conversation. Even though this is, I'm sort of ultimately talking to the screen, this is like having a sort of a chat with a friend or a coffee with a friend, which really, I really like that. That really means a lot to me. So I hope that I've managed to give you a little bit of company, maybe give you some things to mull over and think about. Yeah, you take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao.